Good morning, Waxville. Kevin Duska, aka Prime Rogue, candidate for OIG elections here. Like the degenerate that I am, it's 4:35 in the morning here in Calgary, and I just saw a post on Twitter about the OIG elections and the voting methodology that triggered me. So I thought I'd come on to give some of my thoughts about the process. Now, the OIG elections aren't publicized very well, and it's very clear in the context of its broader failure to communicate that the OIG makes virtually no effort to publicize voting, or hitherto hasn't. Who knows? That might change this time around. That would be freaking great, wouldn't it? But historically, that has not been the case. Now, in a democracy, a real democracy, and by the way, the United States of America is theoretically a democracy, but it's what's called a Republican democracy. So for those of us who want to get pedantic about this, yes, the United States is a republic, but it's also a democracy. But regardless, the principle of democracy, the core principle, at least as it pertains to voting, is one person, one vote. Now, if we go back into the history of democratic theory and philosophy, John Stuart Mill is an author who spoke to this somewhat, writing after the English Civil War in defense of emerging from a state of nature, that is to say, a state in which there is no government. He endorsed a government. Unlike his compatriot Hobbes, who suggested that a tyranny would be appropriate, and that as the people of the world gave their sovereignty to a government, they could not take it back, even if the government was abusive. Locke was different. Locke believed in the principle that a governance entity, a government, owed something to its citizenry. In that respect, he was afraid of something called the tyranny of the majority. And the tyranny of the majority that Locke was afraid of was the notion that in a democracy, a majority of people could oppress a minority. If 90% of people have trait X and 10% have trait Y, and it's one person, one vote, what's to stop people with trait X from oppressing people with trait Y? Nothing. That's why the United States has the Bill of Rights. That's why Canada has the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and so on. Germany, the basic laws, etc., etc. But back to Wax. Wax attempts to give the illusion of democracy. But Wax is not a democracy. Wax is an oligopoly, maybe even a cartel, and we'll get into that in a moment. But the reason why Wax OIG voting is this is a very hard word to say, oligopolistic, Oligopolistic, is that the voting is weighted. It's based on how much staked wax you have. That's what determines OIG votes. Not one person, one vote. How much wax you have staked. So a person with one wax staked versus a person with 600 wax staked, well, the latter person will have 6 times more voting power, 600 times more influence. And now there's a reasonable argument in favor of this. I don't know what the latest percentage is, but do you know what percentage of wax users are bots? How many actual daily users we have? I've seen people throw away estimates that 80% of newly created wax accounts are Alien Worlds bots. If you go look on blocks, you can actually kind of see it. And you'll see huge tranches of these accounts being created and just being delegated or given 5 wax to go mine on Nary or whatever. So there is an argument to be made in favor of weighted voting. And that argument is the proliferation of bots on wax. I've heard people estimate that the true number of daily wax users is somewhere between, I've heard low estimates at 5,000. I find that low. I've heard 15 to 25. I'm more in the 15 to 20K range personally. And that's a good user base. But it's not 15,000 people that are signing the vote. It's about 100, 200. And do you know which entities have the most staked wax? It's the entities that stand to benefit the most from how the guilds vote and how the OIG decides in relation to the guild's output. With that in mind, I've come up with a modest proposal. Considering we're facing governance issues here on the chain, here on Wax, considering that we're striving towards digital sovereignty, isn't that kind of the point of the blockchain? Why wouldn't we move towards a system where we weight it so that each real person, each real human, or at least each real human run account on the chain has an equal vote, rather than maintaining this oligopoly? And if the parties that are bringing these candidates into power are actually coordinating their votes, and holy moly, did you guys see how the vote swung at the last election? That wouldn't be just an oligopoly. That would be a cartel. Think OPEC. Think price fixing. Now, we know the crypto space is unregulated now, but what is the United States SEC and Supreme Court going to do in the next few years? I have a pretty good feeling that regulation is coming to the crypto world. I'm a fan of some regulation, but not great regulation. But we can do a lot better than what we're doing now. And you know what we can do? Rather than maintaining this charade of democracy in this oligopolistic context, we can actually, and no, KYC won't work because some Wax users and other chains users reasonably have to stay anonymous because they might live in repressive countries under despotic regimes. Universal KYC is a pipe dream. It's not going to happen, and it can't happen, and it would be unreasonable to request it. But what could happen is multiple methods of verification of proof of humanity. That is to say, an account that solves a very complex CAPTCHA or that links a social media account in a manner that probably also involves a CAPTCHA. Something that a bot can't easily do. If Wax were to create a system whereby those accounts were given one equal vote, that would reinforce the notion that this is an actual election rather than a mere oligopolistic setting in which the power dealers of the chain are attributing votes to the person who will best serve their interest. And the problem here is, as it's written in the OIG's own notion, they are here to serve the chain and its users, not its whales, not the guilds, the users who benefit from the block producers. So this is a very modest proposal, Wax. Why not change the voting method for the OIG? Why not strive towards the democratic ideals of John Stuart Mill, of Jürgen Habermas, and other democratic theorists? Why maintain this artificial oligopolistic and potentially cartelized system when we could do so much better? It's not too hard, to code a CAPTCHA. I've only been coding for a few months now. As I said, I'm not really technically qualified for any of this, but I know how to code a CAPTCHA. It is not rocket science now, is it, folks? Any legitimate proof of humanity for the chain, and I keep moving my hand because my camera is zoomed in on me because it's a new smart camera and I can't get it to unzoom. It wants me to do things, and I don't know what those things are, but I digress. We can do much better than this on Wax. We can have a system that benefits the median user, and in benefiting the median user, we might be taking away some of the perks from the guilds, but you know what? We're going to be genuinely rewarding the best guilds and the best block producers. And that's what the OIG is supposed to do in the first place. Doesn't that sound neat? It sure does to me, and I think it sure does to a lot of my fellow Waxians. So, my modest proposal to you and I'm not engaged in satire like Jonathan Swift here. I'm no Jonathan Swift, trust me. Consider reforming the voting mechanism of wax. There are ways to implement proof of humanity. And yeah, there are a lot of Alien Worlds bots, but they can't stop us. They're just bots. Again, Kevin Duska, aka Prime Rogue, one of your candidates for OIG in this cycle. Thanking you for tuning in. And thank you for Rukian Farfellow, my fellow Canadian, seconding that here in the chat. Thank you. Have a great night. And regardless of who you're voting for, or whether you're part of a cartel or part of the problematic oligopoly that's currently governing wax, vote no matter who you're voting for. Thank you.